Hi, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm really glad to be here, to be back. You know, it's been 13 years, maybe 12. We really don't know, but I have, I was walking through the campus, and I had all these memories. You know, it's this. It was really nice to be here again. So it feels like home. Hopefully, we'll continue coming back. So. We are MMX Studio. Usually they think that MMX has something to do with Mexico because we're a Mexican-based office, but actually it's not. MMX is basically just a Roman numeral for 2010, which is the date we just started. So we've been here for 13 years or 14 years, since we started the office. That's the famous door, that's the entrance of our office, of our Mexico City-based. It's an old house in La Condesa, in the center of Mexico City, and as Dennis was pointing out, we painted every year. We changed the color of the door, and it's like elections. There's a lot of people wanted this color or that color, and then it gets voted, and then it's very democratic, and then we choose a color. If you don't like it, well, you wait 1 year, and then you might be able to change it. So it's been many colors already. So we like this because, if you've worked with us, together with us, you might be working on the, I work on the blue, like the blue era or the red era or the yellow era. So it's, you get these memories. Of course, that project was, it was the yellow one. So that's the office. It's filled with models. We like it a lot to work with models. You'll see a little bit further in the presentation. That's our office. They say that it's like going to someone's house. When you see how the house is, you sort of understand how they work. So this is a really quick tour through our office. We have the studio with the meeting room on the bottom. Then we have the studio in the middle ground, and then we have a small pavilion that we built. Those are my partners, Diego, Jorge, Nacho, and myself, living there at the top of the office. So we do a little bit of everything. We have this policy of saying yes to almost everything that we are asked to do. So for the last probably, I would say 7 years, we have been doing a lot of these public projects. We've been doing schools, we've been doing libraries, we've been doing community centers, we've worked in open space, squares, all across the country. We've been doing all of these really interesting projects in public space, which we didn't do 7 years ago, and now we have been working on all of these. We probably have done like more than 30 projects in the last 5 years all across the country. But today we're not going to talk about that. So if you want to hear anything about all these public projects, as Dennis was saying, today is not the day. We're going to talk about something completely different. So as a small commercial, Dennis already said it. If you want to hear something about that, I'm going to be tomorrow presenting all of this side of the projects that we do in public realm at the Modern Museum. And then on Wednesday at the Dallas Forum in the Angelica Film Theater. Yeah. But today we're going to be talking about the rest of the projects that are not public, all these private commissions that we've had. And I put a lot of stuff in here, so I'm going to go really fast because I wanted to show you a lot of things. So I'm not going to get really deep into the details, but I want you to understand, how we work through just looking at, how we do things. So we really think that diagrams and drawings are really important. They can convey powerful ideas really quickly, and then we have to. They're not easy to make. You always say a diagram is just like something we can do really fast, but actually it takes a lot of understanding of the main ideas. And we like to work with diagrams, and we also like to work with models. Well, this supposedly had some sound, but It's not really important. These are a set of models that we do at the first stages of the project. So we're very much interested in testing ideas. So as Dennis was saying, we don't believe in like the genius that comes up with one idea and it's, we just need to develop. So we try a scheme and we try another one and we try another one. And even the schemes that sound very or look like they're like, this is not bad, you have to try them until you actually understand whether or not they're the good way to go forward. And they're really quick, really abstract. But they help us a lot to understand the very first steps. And then you have this other set of models. Once you've made a decision, you have this model which is abstract enough, so it doesn't have windows, or it doesn't have materials, but it conveys the principles of the main idea. So this is a stage we really like in the process, in the designing process, because it doesn't really matter whether this has like a round windows or a grid on top of it. It's just like the main idea that comes across. And then, of course, we have another set of models that we do afterwards with windows and with materials. These are the kind of models that I saw today during the studio that they help conveying these ideas to the client, for instance. Sometimes the client doesn't want to see just like a wooden box. But it's a completely different mindset when you're doing these models than when you're working on the let's say the first ideas during the process. And then we have another set of models. When you start all the construction development, we keep on doing models. And we do models about like a structural system or a roof or maybe a facade system. And these, it doesn't come across like that, but these are huge models usually. These are huge models that we have at the office. Here they look as the same size as the other ones, but the models are start to get bigger and bigger, and it's really good to work with models. Why? Because there's 4 partners, so it's me and 3 more, and when you are at the table and trying to have a discussion, drawings are really tricky. They show a little bit of the reality, but you're not looking at the same thing. You can imagine a lot of things. When you have a model, everyone can see the same thing, so it's not subjective. If it's too tall, they're all going to see the same thing. If it's too wide, they're all going to see the same thing. So we had an exhibition showing our work at a museum like probably 6 years ago, and we decided to showcase our work by showing only models. And we decided to show this particular stage of the process. So we didn't show any big models with construction details. We show all the projects with these models that are right at the stage where the idea is really strong. And as you develop it further, you have to go back to that model and make sure that the ideas are still valid for that model. So we really push all the development to be truthful to this stage. So I'm going to talk about some things that we are interested in, and then we're going to show some projects that might just hopefully make some sense out of what we're talking about. So the first thing, and it's the idea of modularity, geometry, and structure. When we were asking, what is it that you do? We always say, well, we just add things up. That's what we do, architects. You have a brick, you add bricks, and you have a wall. You add walls, you have a space, you add spaces, you have a building. You add buildings, you have a district. You add districts, you have a city. And it is on the very essence of the module that you would find ways to actually, strategies to put these things together. So if you have a bunch of stones, you would find a strategy to put them together like this. But if you had a completely different unit, then you need to understand that the strategy needs to change. And if it gets complex and more complex, then you might be you need to be really creative, no? If you have to, put a lot of bricks and then just put them with a bicycle somewhere else, you have to be really imaginative, This guy is it's a hero. So the fun part of our work is basically thinking that very unit, the intelligence of that unit that might be added up and then transform it into something more complex. It's where the fun bit is. So it's not only designing the unit, but also designing the way it can be put together that could bring you something really interesting. So I'm going to go and run through some projects. I'm going to be really quick so I can hopefully finish the 1,000 slides I have here. But it's more about just like showing you, like the process. So by looking at all of these, you would have a sense of what we do. So in terms of modularity, this is a project for a company that sells stones, and they asked us to design various pavilions in different events where they'll be showcasing, their company. So we were told, we told them instead that instead of designing different projects for each pavilion, we will only design one piece, that very unit, one large geometric stone. So that with several of them, we could have different configuration for each installation. So in one of the events, it was put like this as a grid. You could go around it in a different place. At a different event, it was put more like this circular room that was really high, that had this amazing texture with the sun, and you could get in. And then at a different event, outside this museum in Mexico City, you would have this configuration of this sort of stands that would encourage people to sit together and interact, etc. This is another project that we did, that we created this unit of 5 elements, the one that's here. And this unit of 5 elements would be able to be added up in all directions. And this was done for a fashion show. So we were basically doing an installation at the entrance of that fashion show, and we wanted to create some sort of a screen so that you would get to the reception and then get into the gallery. And because it was a fashion show, we wanted to have this sort of textile that would just make this for the people who would get in there. And because the sponsor was American Express, the material we were given to use was credit cards. So we said, well, we can do that with credit cards, but we're going to come up with this system. And then you can see, the five elements unit here that sort of weaves all over this entire space as a sort of a ceiling. So this was a huge space, and you had it like in the ceiling, and then it would just have a drop, just like a dress would have. This was a fashion show. So, but we were creating this screen for them, and I believe there were more than 20,000 credit cards. Unfortunately, they didn't have any funds. But it was really fun, and you could see this thing, from various sides, and it was really interesting. We did all these by hand. That was 10 years ago. There's another installation. This project, we were asked to present an architectural gallery space in Mexico. We were asked to represent. There's this space called Liga. They showcase Latin American offices, and we were asked to do an installation at a different gallery in Lisbon, Portugal, at the Triennale. So the unit is actually the geometric form of the original floor plan of the gallery, which is this crooked triangle. In Mexico City, there's this tiny little triangle. So this crooked triangle, we repeated it in this rising diagonal as many times as we could within the gallery space in Lisbon. So we were just basically repeating the floor plan, which is this, again and again and again all across this space in a sort of a diagonal. And this idea was the idea to confront these two spaces and make evident the lack of infrastructure and the unconventionalities of the Mexican gallery. So you would have these sort of ribbons, these red ribbons with scaffolding. It was a temporary structure that would just repeat all across the space, and you wouldn't see the end of the space of the larger gallery because it was going down. And so you would get into this space, you would get closer to these ribbons all the way up to a point where it was basically at the height of your eyes. And then you wouldn't see the rest of the intervention, but you would have a sense of a feeling of how big this space in Mexico is, what are the proportions, and then you would go out, and then you would have again these perspectives where you couldn't understand how big the gallery in Lisbon was because you would never see the end. This is another installation at this beautiful museum designed by Matthias Geritz in Mexico City. So here we wanted to create a new roof to the main courtyard. This was a competition we won. But we wanted this roof in a way that it wouldn't feel like a traditional roof. We wanted the courtyard to still come across. So we wanted a space that would be neither open nor enclosed. So we created this sort of textile on top of it, done with, we did this with 2 chains and a lot of ropes. And it would create this space that was sort of a room, but it was an open room. And you would have these views from inside the building. And you would have the shadows, cast across the walls and in the floor. And this was used this was programmed. They had movie screens, they had a runway, they had lectures. It was really interesting how they would interact with this space. In this project, this is another one. The main unit was this rectangular wooden section that could be added up to create different structural sections of this small pavilion. So here the unit is not the building itself, but it's the unit that would create different structural elements. So you'd have the columns done in 4 units and the beams done with the same unit, but in 2 and 4 units in different configurations in order to create this space stubbornly created with this, again, the same section of wood again and again. This model here, it looks very much like these wooden sections, but this is actually a house. So it's the same sort of idea. But this is a house that's right at the slope, a very steep slope on the outskirts of Mexico. So these units could actually, they were at different heights, creating these terraces, and we wanted these units to have these spaces in between, so you could have these amazing views in between them, and you would feel like you're surrounded by views, because this project it's in the middle of this amazing landscape where you have trees all around. So these units would be just like they're sitting on the slope, with gaining all the views that you can. So even to get into the house, you will have this bridge there, and then you would have these terraces at different levels that would create the feeling that the gardens and the terraces are are immense, because you have the woodlands coming into your house. And then we design at the very bottom all the open spaces. We also do landscape design. So we created these very intricate spaces right at the bottom. This is another project that's a house that started with this very simple process of just creating a huge envelope and then making sure that each room, you split it up in different rooms. So you have the kitchen, you have a living room, you have a dining room. But then we realized that if we were to put a garden and create a garden around it, it was a shame just to go to one room, have a door, cross it, and then enter to another room, and then have a door. So, we were lacking an opportunity to actually engage with the open space. So we had this very simple strategy to split them up. So you would have a gap between each of these rooms. So it sounds like it's really silly, but you get it's almost like you go to a room and then you cross a door, but you get out in order to again go into the next room. So this sequence of going out and going in, these black spaces are basically the spaces, these thresholds that are in between these rooms. So each of the volumes would be one room. So you have like a room here, like the dining room, the living room, the kitchen, and these were these very solid abstract volumes, very simple. But what's really interesting for us here is all these gaps that you have in between these boxes. So we wanted the project to be very stiff from the outside, very not necessarily heavy, but not try to do too many moves. But on the interior, we wanted really to have a very cozy, this wooden structure that would have a three-dimensional way into it. So you would have these spaces, and you would have to go out in these spaces. This is an interior space, but it feels like it's you have a breath of light, of views towards the garden, and then you go into another room. This is the living room, and then you would have several of them. Some of them have 2 stories, so you have at the bottom, this is a family room, and then at the top you would have some other program. And some of the corridors would have this really nice sequence of light. When you would look at these corridors, then you would understand that you were sort of going out and in, and it was not this typical house where you go from one room to another. This is another house, but in this case we had several units. But the units were all different, as opposed to the other one that was very rational. It was very modular. It was very rational. This time, we had our client was an architect, which is probably the worst nightmare. So we were trying to convey this idea. So let's do something modular. It's going to be easier, and we can play with it. And he was like, no, because I want my living room to be really double height with light coming from the south, but I want the dining room to be like lower with a tiny window here, and then I want so it was for us, imagine it was like how are we going to do this? And at some point we decided to this is not our battle. We said let's they're the clients, they're going to live there, so let's do it. So each room can be different, but let's find a system where we can assemble them and play with these gaps in between them so that we can articulate them. So the voids in here are really important. So you have light coming in, and each of the rooms it's different because the plot, the side was a little bit crooked. But we managed to create this sequence of spaces that each volume was different. And each volume would have only one part of the program. For instance, one volume is just the car, the garage. The other volume is just this table. The other volume would be this, the living room, etc. And that would turn into this very geometrical, very abstract, concrete volumes. So you have all these volumes which are different. And they sort of look like this landscape of volumes that it's really complex. But because each of these volumes was thought through and designed from the interior, they're very quiet and tranquil and very controlled. It's not a house that it's really interesting because it gives you the idea of being really complex, but it's actually a very simple house, with rooms of different proportions, just integrated, into the same complex. So this is the dining room, the living room, and you have this condition, this sequence that runs through the whole house, where you can look at the other garden from the other side with these thresholds. So it's like this landscape that connects these two gardens, the landscape of volumes, I mean. So apart from the modularity, we are interested in landscape and architecture. We're interested in the gradient between landscape and architecture. Where is it that the landscape can be transformed and reconfigure the space? How is it that we can start modifying it? In this installation done by Richard Long, he accommodates some of these rocks, and all of a sudden this site starts to have a new dimension and a new scale and a new set of hierarchies. And instead of being just one endless space, it has two different areas, like one side and another side. It has a beginning, it has an end, it has a scale. It's very simple, but it completely changes this site. These subtle changes that define the outside and an inside, like these portico structures that we have in Mexico City in colonial architecture, where you're not necessarily inside or outside, but somewhere in between. And there are some buildings that they have pushed in Mexico this idea in colonial times to the very extreme, and they're really, really, really nice. So just like defining some lines that would just create an order. So this is a really simple project that we developed for a garden. We were asked to develop a garden, to design a garden for a house that already existed. And they had these different programs on it. So we created these lines, this set of lines that would reconfigure the space into this quadrangle that would have different hierarchies. It's just very simple in the main area of the house. We did all the landscape from scratch, so every plant that you see here is new, so there was nothing in there. And what's interesting here is that we just define this area with these lines and like beams and roofs that would just create different areas where some of the areas could have this sort of roof, so you could program them in a different way, and some other ones would just define where the vegetation could go just wild, and where which areas could be more usable. This is another project for a house that we had this client that asked us to do this huge house. And they had a big plot, but it wasn't big enough to accommodate a big house and a big garden. But she was really keen on having a huge garden. And we were saying, well, you can't have both. You either have a lot of construction there, or you either have a garden. And they were really stubborn. Well, we need to have both. So we came up with this idea, with this strategy. You have these two units of rooms. We lifted these elements so that they would be facing each of them a terrace with a garden. So you have rooms, and then we split them up in heights, in different heights, so that they would have views. They wouldn't have blocked views. And then we lifted in a way so as to create a very fluid ground level. So at ground level, even though we could have a garden, it was a very narrow garden. But if we were to have the idea of a larger space, we would have to integrate the public spaces into the garden, as a sort of an ambiguous space that it's neither a garden nor an interior space. So the idea of the garden started from the very entrance. This is the garden it's a perimetral garden with the volumes. You can see here the two volumes that are at the top with the rooms, and they have terraces, and they have these open terraces and these covered spaces with these amazing views that overlook towards this public space. So it would feel that they have a big garden there, but actually you had this garden surrounding the house that was very much integrated into in the ground level with the spaces there. And we wanted to make sure that as you would go through the house at the ground level, you would have always these views to the different points of the garden, so it would feel like you are just surrounded by a garden, to a point that for us it was important to feel that some spaces really felt like we're integrating into the gardens, like this one, which is some sort of family room that has this really big garden. And because we have the concrete outside and inside, it feels like it's almost like an outside pavilion. That's another house where the landscape was really powerful. You're going to see some images. And here, this was a really large house. And we thought, if we actually build here a huge house, like they're asking us, we're going to completely destroy the landscape. So ideally, we would like just to have one small pavilion there at the edge, and then to have the black part of it in the model, which is the landscapes. So we decided to just do a pavilion, a small pavilion with a public space. This is a countryside house. So it's the second house as they go just for the weekend. So they spend most of the time not in the rooms, but in the living room and in the gardens. So we have the house next to the neighbor, so we wouldn't see the neighbor back to back, and then you would have all these views towards the garden and towards a lake that it's just there. And the rest of the program, we actually put it underneath. So it was helping us to extend the garden, so it was underneath, but you have all these rooms and more rooms and more rooms there underneath, and we wanted somehow to get rid of the rooms. So we said, let's have the rooms at the very edge, and then we have them because you have some sort of slope. You can see here in the section. So this would help us to just extend, this amazing landscape, natural landscape that you have here, and then just have the rooms right at the edge. This is the pavilion. It's our version of this traditional Mexican architecture that you have in the countryside. In Valle de Bravo, you have these pitch roofs with tiles and wood structures. And as you can see, the landscape is just beautiful. So when we went there to see we saw these rocks, and we said, there's no way we can build a house on top of these rocks. So we actually did this small pavilion. That's the only thing you see, and it's a wooden structure that has these views, open views towards the lake. So you have the best views, and you have, of course, a view to the garden, which has this integration. Even the swimming pool, we try to integrate into this idea of being in the middle of the rocks and the landscape. And you don't see where the rooms are until you start going through the site, and then you can go down through this landscape, and then you would find all of these rooms that are underneath that you cannot see unless you go around them. And even though they have a really tiny space in front of them, they have these amazing views as well. So we have these really good rooms where you go take a shower, you have this amazing view, completely private, and then you go up and then spend all day long at the garden with the rocks within the rocks, and the rooms don't exist. It's about this relationship between the landscape and the architecture. That's another house that is related to this idea of integration with the landscape. That was, again, a pretty dense and large program that we were asked to do. And it's funny because now that I say, we always have these clients that come to us and say, we're going to do just like a small house. We're not like everyone that wants to build like a huge house. We're not like that. But we want probably like 5 rooms, and we would like a family, but it could be tiny, but each room, you would have to have at least 3 beds, because, I invite my brother with their children, but just don't make it that big, because, but we need a kitchen, and we have service with the people, and then we have, it's always the same thing, You have these people that, in their minds they want to have like small little cottage, but at the end, you have these structures of hundreds of square meters. So this is one example, just like this. So in order for them to create this idea or this sense that they would have small pavilions, we came up with this this strategy where, these are these three really long shifting volumes, but just by creating these empty spaces, these voids here, if you can see here, each of the volumes has 4 facades open to an open space. So even though it's really dense, each space has a window at each direction. So if you are at any whatever room you are, you would have an open view in to the 4 directions. So that would give you the idea that you are basically surrounded by nature. So as you can see, this is a really large house that is in the middle of the woodlands as well. So these voids helped us to articulate all the trees that were, integrate the trees that were there in the site. And this is what you see when you get into the closer to the house. So we always want the nature to be the main actor of these because nature is really beautiful and powerful. So what you see is basically just this black roof that it's there. This is a house where we designed as well all the landscape. So everything here it's done also with the office. It's a house that it's made in concrete with these pitched roofs and wood. And as you can see, these shifting volumes, you have these really long trees, these tall trees that you can see, and you don't know whether they're like getting into the house, and they're literally getting into the house because they're going through into these voids. So you have these volumes carefully sitting there right next to the trees. So you would have the trees sometimes outside, sometimes you would have the house in the foreground, and you would have the trees on the back, and you would have these sort of spaces inside. So this is one of the spaces that's at the very heart of the house. And as you can see, you have a window to your right, and then you have an open courtyard with a huge tree there in front of you, and then you have an open space and to the left. And then if you were to see the other perspective, you would have another view behind you. And then you have this pitched roof with light coming from the south, because this is an area where you can get really cold, so we need to heat these spaces. And we were playing with the hierarchy of these views. So some of them would be smaller, and then you would have like really wide views to the other side. And then you would have this grid that sort of runs across these volumes that actually continuously connects all the spaces. And these corridors are really nice because you are somewhere in between spaces, and we like the idea that it's really ambiguous, because for instance here you have a covered but open space on the right side, but you have a patio, like a really open space where it rains on your left side. And then if you go further up, you have like an interior and an exterior and a covered space, and you always have this mix of different conditions. And the volumes and the house is very simple. We like that, from the outside, it just feels like it's just very simple. Sometimes, to get something look simple, it takes a lot of work. But we really like when it's subtle and it looks not like a really complex structure. This is another house in the countryside, not far away from there. This was really interesting because this was for a family and a couple that also wanted a really small house, and you know how this story ended up. But when we asked them, what kind of spaces do you like? What are, if we're going to do a house, just tell us a little bit of on where is it that you like to go? How is your idea of ideal sort of architecture that you would want for your house. And she told us, I like these modern, concrete, very minimal spaces. I'm really into it, with maybe some wooden beams, but, like really no columns, just very horizontal. And then he was saying, well, I'm more into like this wooden little cottage, like in the woodlands. I always imagine this house like a second house, like a small cottage, with these pitch roofs and not very horizontal. I like vertical. So of course, and they say, well, that's. You do whatever you want to do with this information, so go and have some discussions. So we had lots of discussions. We went through various. So we were like, who's here the powerful guy? We need to know who's in charge in here, so we don't mess it up. So at the end, we ended up having this scheme that it was some sort of hybrid scheme where the lower part of the house was really open in concrete, very horizontal, very minimal in a way, and we had the second floor with the rooms done as if they were like a cottage. So we have, these 4 rooms, the master room, and then 4 rooms there. So you have a street going at the back. So the first floor, well, the ground floor had a garden, a beautiful garden there, but you have these public spaces open, really wide open to the garden, and then you have almost like these 4 cottages on top of this structure. So it's like this. This is the result of the house. That's you can see here the road. That's why the ground level it's basically blocking all these views. But once you are at the top, you have these views that are like amazing views towards the different parts of the woodlands. And then you have the 4 rooms with a space in between them that works as, it's a family room, so it works as a hinge in between all these private rooms or private spaces. So you have this concrete, very abstract facade at the bottom as if it was a plinth. And then you have, it's almost like you have another building on top of this. So it's very, from the street, of course, it's almost like a fortress. And then you have this thing on top, which is like this pitch roof structure. So you have these open spaces with concrete and wooden beams with no columns, as she wanted at the ground level, and open to this space, which is the garden, which is where they spend most of the day. And then you go up, and then you have this completely different atmosphere there. You have this sense of being like a wooden structure. This is you would go into mezzanine, so you would go into our version of this traditional wooden cottage that you could find in the countryside, and with a mezzanine that he asked us, I really like the idea of a mezzanine. So I think this is one of the nicest, probably most interesting spaces in the house. Another thing that we like to reflect upon is this idea of people and the city. How do we live collectively? So how do we relate to one another? This is an installation done by Abramovic, where she and her partner stood there at the threshold of a gallery and naked. So they would see what the reactions were, from the people. So they wanted to see who were they be facing. Were they be facing, her or him, or there would be people that didn't even cross because they felt a little this tension between the persons. And we really like this idea of how do we interact. How private we would like to go, when you have a personal space, and then you have to sort of relate to other people. And this idea of the public space where does it stop? The public space for us, it doesn't finish or ends at the door of a building. It should go inside, the building, and instead of having like black and white, you would probably it's better to have a gradient of, from public to private integrated into your building. So this is a project for a house. That it's a modular house, again, that it's done just like a brick structures with modules, that in 3 stories. But this is not one house, it's actually 2 houses. So you have 2 houses but they were 2 families that had just 1 plot. So they asked us, we have this plot, which is, we managed to have this plot together, but we want 2 houses. But we actually want to, if there's an open space, we want, to have the space should be ours. And they were saying, well, no, it should be ours. If you do a garden, it should be, why don't we just make 2 houses and then split up, and you would have a small garden, you would have a small garden. And they were, no, we don't want a small garden. We want because this is a tiny plot. So, we have to, if you have an open space, it has to be for both. So at the end we ended up thinking that, well, maybe we think about this, instead of thinking that these are 2 houses, maybe we just do one interlocked house where you have 2 families interlocked into this structure. So it's not the traditional house where you would have one section that is one family and the other one. So the volumes would be like interlocked, and they would be sharing spaces. They would be sharing spaces, but they didn't want to look over to the other neighbor. So that was really complex. I don't know if you can see here, but this is one house. That's another one in the ground level. But at the upper level, this house starts to go, on top of the other one, and this one starts to go on top of this one, and then, they start to go one into on top of the other. This is a typical plot on the south of Mexico, where you have to leave an open space here, so you are basically left with these very dense structures. So you cannot. There's this setback. So you always have to build almost like the entire front. So we ended up with this red concrete house with huge openings and huge walls, so that we could make sure that each family would have a great view, but to a wall, not to a neighbor. And you have this subtle. I don't know if you can see this. This is very subtle. But you have 2 different textures. Here, the concrete, and here you have a different texture. That sort of conveys, where one house starts and how it interlocks with the other one. So you have these views that are very private, and so they're all living this courtroom, but they cannot see one another. So you have this really massive block with lots of windows, lots of different typologies of open space. That's a housing project with 3 units that it's also interlocked. We wanted all of them to have at least one garden. So when you have 3 stories, the first at the ground, the lower one would have an extension of a garden naturally. You have the ground level, but then the other 2, they're further away from the ground. So what we did is we interlocked them so that they would go from one space to another level, and then they would go to a rooftop, and then the other one, as a spiral, would have the same and would go to a rooftop. So they would have the feeling that you go up and then you have a rooftop, but and we didn't want one to be on the back and one to be on the front. So we wanted all to have a front facade. So that's why we had to do this interlocking system. And we had these shared spaces, open spaces, with the circulation at the very core, in the central courtyard. And we were making these open spaces, like the terraces, also a shared space, which means that here you can see like double heights happening there. That is because we wanted each of the open spaces to feel really, really large, and so that if you had if you only had your roof and then your terrace, then it would feel really low. So we would have these double heights, but the double height would be open to the neighbor, so the neighbor could feel also that he would have a double height, but to the neighbor underneath. So they were sharing these spaces, and at the central court, at the central garden, you had all the circulations. So it was very private, but you had all these really big windows, but you couldn't see your neighbor. So just like that. So all the spaces were related to an open space, but they were all really private and very well integrated into the spaces inside. This is a housing project for, I believe, 23, 24 units, where the developer told us to, we did a lot of different versions, but at the end we ended up with something like that, and the envelope was really keen on doing this version here. Where you have these courtyards, which are really not really big. So we didn't like it because you have these front units here, which are really great, but the ones on the back, they always feel like, they're like the second ones, they're on the back, they're not related to the street. So we managed to have this version of what the developer wanted, a little bit distorted, so that we could create this, what we call the crack. We could open at least a little bit, the space, so that it would flow all the way down to the units at the back, so that you would go from the street, you would have a continuous open space that would lead you to the units on the back, and then you would have the feeling that you're not at the rear side of the building. They all had at least a glimpse of the street, which in Mexico City is really important because this idea of it's so dense that the idea of being open and integrated, it works it works really well. So this is this is the building with what we call the crack there, with the vertical circulations, and at the very end of the plot, you would have even these views, and even though they look tiny here, you would go there through them, and they would be wider at some points, and you would always have this feeling that the street is right there, so you're not like in the middle of the block. And this is a place where you can find your neighbors, you can say hello to them, and you would be somehow in a private space as well. That's another housing project for probably 24 units at a very special area in Mexico, where you have the corners of every single street are cut. So you have these beautiful diagonal schemes from the 50s. So we wanted to have that. We wanted to sort of have the entrance and everything organized through this idea of the diagonal of the corner. And we really like the idea that you have the corner, which basically in this area it's almost like a square, because you have no corners, so it's really wide, and it's really a public space. So we wanted to have a sequence where you have a really public space outside, then you would go into public space, but it's not as public as the street, because this is the space where you have the circulations and you meet all your neighbors. And then you have a space that it's more private, where you wouldn't see any of your neighbors. You would only be, it's almost like this shared garden that feels really private. So these are units of different sizes. This is what you would see in the street, with the entrance at the very corner, with units that you have duplex and you have one-story units. So we wanted to make sure that the facade, you would understand how they work. This is the garden where you meet all your neighbors, where you can. We like the stairs not to be like just a service stair. We really like the stairs to be a choice. So it has to be nice. So this would be this space, the central space where you would go down, And that would be the space at the very end where all the rooms were overlooking the space, but you wouldn't see any neighbors, and it would be like really private. And I'm gonna sort of finish with this project. I'm gonna explain a little bit further. This is a company that asked us in Guadalajara. This is a project for a company in Guadalajara. This is Guadalajara here. And you have a natural reserve in here, right there. So this is a company that has an industry it's called Betterware. It's a British company. So they're like a version of, let's say, Amazon, or so they get products from all over the world, and they just put them in a box and send them to you, wherever you are. And it's been really successful. So they have now the warehouses and the offices right in the middle of Guadalajara. And of course, it's a problem for the trucks to go into the urban areas. So now they have a new plot there right at the edge of the Primavera Reserve, natural reserve, right where the landscape changes from this to this, which is the mountain that it's basically the natural reserve. This is the plot there. So you have nothing there. It's just like an empty space. And this is what they had. So they have these warehouses with no natural light, with no views, with no air, fresh air there. And they have this, what they call, and they have a lot of storage. So you have these forklifts going in and out for 8 hours, shift of 8 hours with no light, no natural light, no views, no everything. So I was like really at the beginning, this is probably a really tough job, like just being there enclosed with no windows. And these are the offices that they had inside the warehouse. So with no windows, with no fresh air. And this is what they call the pick and pack line, where they take all, products, and they have a box, and they put, each of these persons is like putting one product into a box, and then hands it to the next person. So they spend hours and hours inside there with artificial light. So this was a competition that we won. And basically what we did is first we came up with this diagram, which is basically how it should work. This is just a programmatic diagram where you have the products coming in from one side. You have trucks coming into this space. And then from here, it needs to be distributed into the storage warehouses here, the gray ones, the dark gray ones. Once they're there, and you have an order, they of course have to go to this larger, this long volume here, which is the pick and pack. So this is, the two light gray ones is where you have most of the people. In the dark gray ones is basically boxes. And then you have an office space that needs to be somehow related to the pick and pack and just next to the storage. So we didn't know that much about these how they were, but we knew that this diagram as a function was working. So we decided to maybe just translate that into a scheme, just make this a building. But we said, well, if we do this and we have all these storage spaces and the pick and pack and the offices, we're going to end up having exactly the same thing as they have. A warehouse where they get in, and then it's going to be horrible, for them. It's going to be the same thing. So we decided to make just this little difference by just creating this space in between. So we basically created these gardens that were in between these pieces. So the white boxes are basically where the people are. So they would all have a bit of a garden or fresh air and views and open. So we went through lots of different versions of it, trying to integrate the gardens, and this is the final plan. This is huge. It was really difficult for us to understand the scale of this. Just to give you an idea, each of these boxes, it's like 60 square meters long, so that would be like almost like 200 feet, long, 200 by 200. So this is huge. So you have here, where the trucks are, the parking for the trucks, and you have here where the first, they bring the boxes here, then they have to go to the storage boxes here, the warehouses, and then they would go through these areas, through these corridors here to the pick and pack, where they would put everything into a box, and it would go out again. And it was funny because we had really huge discussions with the client, because we said, this is a great idea. You put a garden in between your warehouse, the storage and the pick and pack, and so you would have great views, and you would have, and they were saying, yes, that sounds really nice, but like if you are like working with a forklift, is that how you call it? You have to go like 100 times in 8 hours, to the work, to pick a box, and then going back, and then to pick a box, and then going back, and this is probably like 5 seconds each time that we're wasting. So we are wasting 5 seconds here. So these 5 seconds multiply by 100, and they would give you these statistics that were like really compelling in numbers. But they're like, we are wasting I don't know how many hours, and this is going to be not efficient as you think. And we said, well, we know that it's not going to be measurable. But I'm sure that if you're driving these forklifts and then you do this thing 100 times, probably after 2 hours with no light, with no views, with no natural air, you're gonna start to slow your pace. I'm sure. I would say, I'm sure, and you're gonna be tired, and then you're gonna go slower and slower, slower. Whereas if each time you go, then you have a view of a garden, you have natural light, you have, and that's not, we said, there's no way we can actually have a compelling number, behind it, but I'm sure that you would get a boost of, like energy when you go there, and then you might be able to work through 8 hours doing the same thing with a different mindset, while you're working. And this was a big discussion because it was really important for us. Even this space here, this is probably like 20 meters, so it looks really small. So that's 20 by 3, like 60 feet here. So this is large. You have a soccer pitch here. So at the end we convinced them that this might be worth a try. And so this is the proportion you have. You have the storage in here. And what's really nice for us is that the pick and pack structure, which is almost like the engine that's working there, it's overlooking the gardens. But the main offices, it's on the same building. So the guy that works with the boxes and the CEO of this international company are in the same place with the same conditions, and that's something we really wanted to push. So why is it that you have some people there in a horrible space, and then you have your office super nice in here? So we said, we're going to put you in the warehouse. But don't worry, the warehouse is going to be really nice. So this is what we did. We designed these modules, which structurally was really interesting because the span had to be huge. So this is the unit for the storage boxes. It's just like 1 second you're going to see this slide, but it took us hundreds of discussions between us, to get to this scheme. And then you have another unit, which is the pick and pack structure that turns into the office building. That has this huge span because it could not have any columns on it, and it would turn into the offices. This is a model where you can see like double heights. For the offices, you had mezzanines and double heights inside this. So this is a section through the whole. You have the parking, then you have the area where you get the boxes, and you have the pick and pack, and that turns into the office building, and then you have again a landscape there. So this is huge. These are some pictures of the site while construction started. And I really like this picture because it's like no man's land. It's like this almost a kilometer, half a kilometer. It's like a third, I don't know, half a mile with nothing, you know, just like nothing there, not even a tree. But that was how it was, and things started to be built, and it was really difficult to get a grasp of the scale there. You know, it was really exciting for us to do this. So this is during construction. You can see the footprint of the different elements there. That's the structure for the office. That's the pick and pack. So this is the office. You can see the bare structure there, and then you see the pick and pack with no columns. And it had to be this high because they have this pick and pack in tiers, like in 5 stories. They would build the structure inside this thing so that it would have different lines at different levels with boxes running. I mean, it's just like this movie from, what is this movie like where they have this Monster Inc. Have you seen like where the doors are, you know, like, and there's this. It was something like that, you know. So that's the pick and pack, and these are the images. There is this lecture that was given by Peter Eisenman. When I was in London, he was giving a lecture, and then he said, you know, sometimes architecture we run out of ideas, you know, and I'm going to give you an advice. You know, if you run out of ideas, just make your project really big. You know, that's going to work. Just make it really big, and if that doesn't work, just paint it red. You know, that's and that's gonna. So we did both. So we made it really big, and we painted it all in red. So I think that's when construction finished, and you have, this is huge. That's the pick and pack, and then the office buildings here, and these are the gardens that they look really tiny here, but they're like not as small as you would think. And for us, it was really interesting that you have these massive blocks, but they're somehow protecting the whole campus from the road, from the highway. They are creating this sort of very intimate space. We wanted, because this is in the middle of the highway, so we didn't want this feeling of, you know, you go to work and you're in the middle of the highway. So we wanted to create like a new atmosphere there. So for the workers, this is the entrance. Those who work in the pick and pack and with the boxes and with the forklifts, they go through this entrance, which is it's a really nice space. It's a green space. It has, instead of just entering into a warehouse, you go through this. We were trying to dignify all, you know, all this work. You know, they work. You know, they have the same hours we do, working in other things, so they have to have the same dignity, you know. So these are the red boxes and the entrance. That's where the trucks would come in. So all the boxes will have to be delivered first into this space, and these spaces they are like really amazing, you know, like all these industrial constructions that are always really, really interesting. And there is when you start to have some people there involved in the process. So even here, you start to have these windows, these huge windows that overlook the gardens. So instead of being just right there in a space that has no light, then they're working with a really nice garden with natural light there. So the boxes go into these huge spaces. And these pictures were taken before all the boxes and the racks were put in, because, of course, this now is filled with boxes. So if you try to take a picture, it's just like racks. No, there's nothing there. But this took us a lot of thinking, you know, this structural system. And I would like you to understand the scale of this. So that's our partner in Guadalajara. You know, sitting there, like, so you can get a sense of this space, which is huge, with natural light, with natural ventilation on the top, and it's a relatively nice space If I were a box, I would like to live here, I guess. This is the corridor that connects these spaces from to the pick and pack. So these are the 5 seconds that it took us so much to, so much energy to convince the clients. And these are the views that you would have. So you would go and cross these corridors, and you would be in the middle of the gardens. And then you would get into the pick and pack structure. So these gardens are like this. You can see, and if you were in the gardens, you would see the guys with the forklifts crossing to one side and going back and forth. This is the pick and pack, and they were starting to build this structure here with the multiple floors. So this was still under construction, but this is a space for the pick and pack. So this is the facade that you have there that is very well integrated with the landscape and with these views. That's the parking on the other side. So if you're the CEO, you would park here. And you would go, just like the workers had this entrance with the corridor and the green space, the people that work at the office building, they would go through these corridors, very green, and get into the main office building, which is this one. There you had terraces, and you have, and for us it was really interesting to see that, trying to convince them that they would have an office building that would look like an industrial construction, because at the beginning they wanted this flashy office building, almost like this glass box. And when we convinced them that the beauty was basically going back to this more industrial, because sort of architecture, because it could have these triple heights, these double heights, mezzanines, light coming from different parts. So that's the main hall of the offices. With you would go up and down. We painted all red, as you can see. Everything was red. So you have these spaces where the garden sort of it connects to the different areas of the offices. You have these spaces all across this part, and the main room, the main meeting room for the CEO and the committee and all these persons was basically right there in between the pick and pack and the office space. So they would have a view, not of the gardens, but they would have a view of the pick and pack, which is basically what we thought was the heart of the company. And they would look at the gardens through this pick and pack. So this is a huge structure. Again, it's modular. It repeats again and again and again. And this one was designed so that it wouldn't have any air conditioning. So it is east-west. So you have facade north, south facade. So with these elements, we could actually be able to control all the sunlight coming inside the space. So some of them would be really just like a very, very landscape, which was really wild. I don't know if that's a word, but we wanted to feel that it was not an artificial garden, but it would feel like as if the garden had been already there, like part of the landscape. And then we would have these paths and these areas that they could enjoy there. So that's this building here. And I believe that's the last one.